Emily entered Adrian Moretti's world believing she was making a controlled bargain, one appearance, one fake relationship, one chance to reclaim dignity. In reality, she was entering the orbit of a highly controlled, deeply violent man whose behavior suggests narcissistic dominance mixed with genuine emotional deprivation. And Emily, fresh from betrayal and humiliation, became vulnerable to the oldest trap in trauma psychology, attaching herself to the one person who made her feel powerful again. By the time the bullets came, the emotional dependency was already complete.
And so it begins with an act of sublime desperation. Emily Carter, her hands unsteady, approaches the city's sovereign of shadows. She carries a proposition that is less a strategy and more a meticulously penned death wish. The offer for him to masquerade as her lover at the wedding of the man who had shattered her existence. She had been discarded, humiliated, and made a ghost, left with only a family relic, a single hopeless plea, and a spirit that refused to be extinguished. She could not guess that Adrian Moretti, lord of an unseen kingdom, would see in her broken reflection a splinter of himself, an image that would disturb him more profoundly than any foe. If this chronicle has reached you, tell me where it found you. I wonder how far the whispers of Emily's defiance carry on the wind tonight. And should you need to know if she prevails in this wager, affirm this record with your approval and follow me further. The Crimson Lounge. It was never a refuge for women teetering on the edge of oblivion. It was a hunting preserve dressed in finery, where the velvet on the chairs was worth more than a life, and predators bartered souls in the twilight. Within this domain, one was either the hunter or the quarry for their wolves. Emily Carter was an enigma here. She hesitated at the entrance, her jacket a poor defense against a November cold that echoed the frost in her heart, bearing the weight of every concealed, assessing stare. A hostess, her posture and exercise in flawless control, and her smile possessing a chill that could quell a flame, intercepted her with the finality of a guard at the gate. "My apologies, miss, but entry is reserved for members." A dryness coated Emily's throat. She had practiced this moment 1,000 times on the train ride over, yet facing the true arbiter of her fate, the rehearsed lines felt fragile. "I have come to see Adrian Moretti." The woman's face was an unmoving portrait of civility, yet a dangerous glint surfaced in her eyes, a clear admonition. "Mr. Moretti does not accept callers without an appointment." "I know." Emily's voice was a thread of pure serenity, belying the storm raging in her chest. "But I have something he will want to see." As expected, the hostess's smile sharpened. "You can give it to his assistant like all the other petitioners." Emily felt her one chance beginning to fray, the familiar, suffocating weight of her own invisibility pressing down. For 3 months she had been an apparition, at her job, in her apartment, and in the mind of the man who had erased her. She was tired, down to her bones, of being nothing. "Please inform him," she said, producing a small velvet box from her coat, "that I am here with a proposal." The hostess's gaze dropped to the box, then flicked back to Emily's resolute expression. An eternity seemed to hang in the quiet that followed. Finally, the woman lifted a single manicured hand, summoning a shape from the deeper gloom. He emerged from the shadows, a mountain sculpted into a suit that cost more than her lease. He was silent, his gaze performing a detached, systematic audit of her very being. "She says she has something for Mr. Moretti," the hostess announced. The massive man held out a hand. After a beat of hesitation, Emily relinquished the velvet box. He flipped it open with clinical indifference, scanned the contents for less than 3 seconds, then shut it with a definitive snap. "Wait here!" He receded into the club's umbral core, carrying her last shred of hope with him. so she stood and waited. The hostess returned to her post, dismissing Emily with the practiced detachment of places that feed on desperation. Two men exited the lounge, their low chuckles dissipating behind them. They smelled of expensive bourbon and entitlement, their glances passing straight through her as though she were glass. Emily started to measure time by her own pulse. 57 beats had passed when the giant reappeared. He will give you 5 minutes. She followed his immense frame down a winding network of halls, past closed doors that held secrets she was glad to ignore. The thrum of music faded, supplanted by a deep, expectant quiet. He stopped at a plain door, rapped twice, then stepped away. 5 minutes, he repeated. Emily's hand closed on the knob before her mind could protest the sheer insanity of her actions. She turned it and walked in. The room was smaller, more intimate than she'd anticipated. A vast window displayed the city's jeweled sprawl, but the light within was so low the view felt like a painting of a world far away. There was a desk, 2 chairs, and the man behind it who did not bother to look up as she entered. Adrian Moretti, a name whispered in headlines, a face known to everyone. Yet no picture had ever captured the sheer gravity of his presence, the way the air itself seemed to bend toward him. He looked to be around 35, with dark hair a fraction too long, severe features, and a countenance that might have been striking if it were not so completely devoid of life. He set the velvet box on the desk, pushed it across the polished wood, and then his eyes met hers. They were the color of slate, not gray or blue, but the flat, cold shade of a storm front, of something that has never seen the sun. "You have 4 minutes left," he said. His voice was a low, steady thing, utterly empty of interest. "Use them." Without waiting for permission, Emily took the seat across from him. It was a small rebellion, but one she needed to feel just to confirm she could still act, still claim a space in a world trying to eject her. "My name is Emily Carter. 3 months prior, my fiancé dissolved our engagement for a more advantageous union arranged by his family." She kept Adrian's gaze, searching for any sign of a reaction. There was nothing. "The ceremony is in 2 weeks. I was sent an invitation. How festive." Adrian's voice was so flat he could have been reading a weather report. "I do not understand what this has to do with me. I need someone to accompany me." That finally drew something from him. It was nearly imperceptible, the slightest arch of one brow, a motion that could mean anything from contempt to mild surprise. "You want me to be your guest at a wedding? I need you to validate the story that I am fine, that his decision did not destroy me, that I am not the pathetic victim everyone believes I am. So this is your brilliant gambit. Walk into my club, present a family heirloom to a man you've never met, and simply expect me to agree." A flush of heat crept up Emily's neck, but her gaze did not waver. "My gambit was to find the only person in this city who knows what it is to be written off. Someone who knows that sometimes to survive, you must invent a truth so powerful it becomes real." And at that, something changed in Adrian's stillness. He didn't soften. That seemed impossible. But his attention sharpened as if her words had struck with physical weight. "You know who I am," he stated, not asking. "I know what matters. Then you know I don't indulge those who waste my time." "This is not an indulgence. This is a business arrangement." Emily nodded toward the box. "My grandmother's sapphire ring. It is worth at least $20,000, probably more. It is payment for a single evening of your time. That is the arrangement. You appear with me, you play the part, and then we are nothing to each other again." Adrian leaned back in his chair, his stare so intense it felt as if it were pressing against her skin. She forced herself to stay still, to hold that stare, to project a composure she was far from feeling. "Why would you assume I have any use for a ring?" he asked at last. "Everyone has something they want, even you." "And what is it you think I want, Miss Carter?" Emily hesitated. This was the last exit, her final moment to stammer an apology, take her ring, and flee with what was left of her dignity. But she had already passed the point of no return. Having walked through the gates and taken a chair she was not offered, she had to see the play to its end. "I think," she said, articulating each word with care, "that your entire world is built on perception, on an aura of absolute control, on a legend so unassailable that no one would dare to question it." She let the words settle in the silence. "I think you know better than anyone that the story people believe about you is the greatest weapon you possess. And I need a new story. I need them to see a woman who didn't just endure, a woman who won." For a long moment, Adrian did not move. Then he picked up the case, opened it again, and this time he actually looked at the ring. It was a modest thing, a simple gold band with a small, deep blue stone free of any flourish, an object whose worth was in its past, not its price tag. "This wedding," he said, his voice quiet, his eyes on the ring. "Where is it?" "The Belmont Estate, about an hour from here. And the groom's name? Nathaniel Ashford." That name was a key turning in a lock. Adrian's head snapped up, and for the briefest instant, a true flicker of interest kindled in his gaze. "Senator Ashford's son. Yes, and you were engaged to him." "For 2 years." Adrian shut the case, placing it on the desk with quiet finality. When he looked at her again, his focus was so sharp, Emily felt as if he were peeling back every layer of her being, seeing every secret, every lie, every weakness she owned. "My presence is required in a gathering of titans, men whose wealth makes consequence a myth." His tone was a blade wrapped in velvet. "I'm to invent a history with a stranger, a convincing fiction delivered in a fortnight. And for this masterpiece of deceit, you offer a trinket that wouldn't cover my incidental costs." Despair washed over Emily. This was a refusal. The plan was insane, a catastrophic miscalculation. "I will do it," Adrian said. Emily was frozen. It made no sense. "I will," he affirmed. "But this is not my price." The velvet box slid back across the polished mahogany. "The ring remains yours." This was not a story of transformation, but a Pygmalion tale inverted, fueled by the cold mechanics of vengeance. Adrian was no artist creating beauty. He was a strategist forging a weapon. His offer was to engineer a living instrument of torment. In just 14 days, he would dismantle her being to construct a new one. A perfect phantom built to haunt Nathaniel Ashford with all he had lost. His motive remained shrouded, an unspoken pact against a shared adversary. The agreement felt less like a contract and more like a paradox. She had come prepared for rejection, only to find a co-conspirator in her desperate plot. A strange magnetism drew her to the mind that was deconstructing her. While every instinct screamed for her to flee, the allure of this perilous alliance was too powerful to resist. She could remain a prisoner to her sorrow or make a devil's bargain with this enigma. Her decision was an act of rebellion against her own despair. His home was the first battlefield, a testament to his authority. It was less a house than a monument to power, a cold, sparse fortress that was the architectural echo of its master. Here, in his sanctuary, he laid down the first condition of her surrender. You will stay in the guest suite on the second floor. It has all you need. The quiet command dismantled any notion of her own will. Her resistance was brushed aside with a chilling logic that laid the terms bare. A perfect illusion required a subject under ceaseless scrutiny. Her entire existence, her work, her home, was deemed an inconvenience to be discarded. His dominion was absolute, her consent assumed. The walls began to feel like they were closing in. She argued it was training, not imprisonment, but his logic was a steel trap. He gave her two options: endure the world's pity as a casualty or claim a victory engineered by his hand. He presented his plan as the sole logical course for inflicting maximum regret upon Nathaniel Ashford. Tragically, his reasoning was flawless. She agreed, stepping into a luxurious prison cell disguised as sanctuary. The chamber was flawlessly sterile, offering no solace. His voice echoed from the hall with the first order. Clothing arrives tomorrow. Sleep. Our work starts at 6. Her disbelief was palpable. At 6 a.m.? His reply was ice. Is there something more important on your schedule? When Emily turned to protest, he was simply gone, leaving a void in his wake. She was a curiosity in a lavish cage, bound to a man who viewed her as an equation. A text from her friend Maya shattered the quiet. Well, did he throw you out? Emily's typed reply felt surreal. He said yes, and drew the immediate follow-up. And what's the price? The question hung in the air. How could she explain a deal where she traded her existence to an enigmatic billionaire for a fortnight? Drowning in a world of staggering opulence, she was lost. Her only recourse was deflection. I'll explain tomorrow. It's a lot. The blank ceiling above was a canvas for her recent history, a void filled with the ghost of Nathaniel's dismissal and the exquisite cruelty of his wedding notice. That humiliation had been a work of art, but now caught in Adrian Moretti's web, both a prison and a salvation, some long-buried part of her began to stir. A new will was being born from the ashes of her despair. A sense of imminent threat had become her new reality. Dawn did not break. It shattered with a sharp, demanding rap on the door. It wasn't Adrian. A new player in this game of power stood before her. The woman, perhaps 50, was discipline personified. From her tightly wound hair to her unyielding stance, her eyes performed a cold, dispassionate scan. Mr. Moretti expects you, she stated flatly. My name is Claudia. I manage the household. Be ready in 15 minutes. The order was non-negotiable. Precisely 14 minutes passed before she walked into a vast dining hall where Adrian sat at the head of a table for 12. He was the picture of remote power, a sovereign in his kingdom who only acknowledged her presence by looking up from a tablet. You're late, but you said 6. 6:14 is not 6. The correction was a precise assertion of control. He indicated a chair without a word. Sit. Claudia placed a plate before her as he gave his next command. Eat. Her protest about not being hungry was met with indifference. Your emotions are inconsequential. Your body needs fuel. His stare was unnerving, an analytical tool examining her every move. The scrutiny ceased, replaced by questioning. Describe Nathaniel Ashford. Her query for specifics was met with a total demand. The entire file. Your shared past, his future goals, the reason he left. The last item hit its mark, and her composure fractured. It was a strategic merger for his family, she recited, her voice a practiced monotone. I'm just a paralegal. He selected a politician's heir, a logical move. Adrian savored the word logical, as if it were poison. It was the word he used. And you accepted it? Her chin rose in a brief show of resistance, but he continued his dissection. A man doesn't sever a 2-year bond for logic. He leaves because he is done. Give me the real cause. His statement stripped away her carefully constructed narrative. He said I was predictable, she admitted in a near inaudible voice. That I was like a familiar, worn-out pair of boots. Her steadfastness had been her downfall, offering no mystery. Adrian's expression was unreadable, but a flicker of interest lit his eyes. So you conceded to this assessment? What else could I do? She countered. It's true, I am background scenery. I'm the wallflower, while men like you own the world. His next words sliced through her defenses. Then what are you doing here? The question stunned her into silence. Because I refuse to be invisible anymore, she whispered. I'm tired of being erased. She laid herself bare, anticipating compassion. What she received was a chilling smile. It held no warmth, only the sharp, genuine satisfaction of a successful experiment. Excellent, he said. The first truth you've uttered. Now finish your meal. Our schedule is demanding. The next 2 weeks, however, were not to be a lesson. They were an ordeal. Adrian had no interest in teaching charm. His goal was to demolish her defenses to their foundation and rebuild her from scratch. He started with her posture. Your shoulders are an apology, he observed after her 10th walk across the chamber. You move as if begging pardon for the space you occupy. Cease. He cut off her excuse. You shrink. Your gait is timid. You are trying to vanish, she corrected, straightening her spine. An improvement, he conceded. Now move as if this ground belongs to you, not as if you are trespassing. She began to occupy her own skin. Emily walked until exhaustion set in and her spirit wore thin. But Adrian was merciless. A tireless observer, he sculpted every movement, driving her past every known boundary. A change started to take root. After 1 week, her posture had power. Her eyes no longer broke contact. Beside his immense presence, she was no longer an echo. In the 2nd week, he turned his attention from her form to her voice. The guests will dissect you, Adrian cautioned on the 8th night. Their inquiries will be scalpels, their praise a poison. He taught her to parry without showing pain. How do I do that? We drill. I will portray Nathaniel's mother. The notion was so preposterous it almost made her laugh. You'd rather I play Nathaniel? It was ludicrous enough to accept. In a moment, Adrian's physicality altered, his posture easing into a counterfeit grace, a warmth that never reached his gaze. The timbre of his voice shifted, acquiring a polished, aristocratic cadence. Emily, darling, what a delight. I wasn't aware you'd found a new distraction so soon. Do tell me about your companion. The imitation was so flawless, it coiled in Emily's gut. That cloying venom was painfully familiar. He's not just a companion, she managed, her tone even. We are involved. How lovely. And his profession? I don't recognize the Moretti name. Is he in banking? Emily went rigid. It was the precise assault she had feared most. How does she conceal Adrian's work without an outright fabrication? He is in private business, she states, weighing every syllable. Adrian, holding the pose, lets a predatory grin surface. So artfully obscure. His fortune must be immense to hold your attention. You always could spot men offering stability. The barb is a surgical strike designed to paint her as a gold digger. But instead of flinching from the poison, Emily tries a new gambit. She echoes his smile. In fact, she parries, her voice a model of control. I think you'll discover I'm the one who furnishes the stability. Adrian's sphere has a distinct kind of chaos. It needs an anchor. With that, the exercise concludes. Adrian's real smile materializes, a crisp, frigid sign of true respect. Improved, he grants. You took the blow and reversed it. You made yourself vital, not decorative. This will be the method for every insult they will throw at you. Their practice sessions were brutal. Adrian became every foe. Nathaniel's parents, prying attendees, even Nathaniel himself. He exposed her to every possible social assault. Each veiled slight, each quiet maneuver meant to brand her as an interloper. And Emily mastered the counterattack. Not with fury, but with a cool certainty forged by enduring threats far greater than these provincial elites. 3 days before the wedding, a stranger met Emily's gaze in the mirror. She stands in her suite, sheathed in a gown Adrian had designed for her. It is a midnight blue silk that clings to her frame like a second skin. She sees another entity, one who commands her space with purpose, who carries herself with more height, and who looks as though she belongs with a man like Adrian Moretti. You are prepared, Adrian's voice cuts in from the doorway. Emily pivots. He was an apparition in a flawless tuxedo, the very picture of billionaire grace, but the look he gives her is what shatters her restraint. A subtle heat in his gaze, something akin to pride. Are you positive? She asks. I have no doubt at all. He glides across the room, stopping before her to adjust her necklace, a gold chain with a pendant that matched the ring she had given him. Emily, look at me. She did. When you walk into that event, Adrian murmurs, his tone a deep vibration, every person there will see what I see, not Nathaniel Ashford's cast-off lover, not some girl defined by her past wounds. They will see the woman who has already won. Emily's breath catches. How can you be so sure? 'Cause for 2 weeks I have watched you become her. He pulls back, and the spell breaks, his cool, emotional shield sliding perfectly back into position. Yet Emily feels a seismic movement inside her, something powerful and undeniable. This is a problem. She is developing an attachment to him, not for the pact, or the protection, or the reinvention. She is falling for the man who saw her when no one else did, who pushed her past her limits, who saw the queen inside her before she ever could. This is a catastrophic issue because in 3 days, she will walk into that wedding with him, play her part, and then their agreement is over. Adrian will go back to his dominion, and Emily will be returned to her old life. Except now she is shadowed by the phantom of this other self, strong, fearless, and maybe not her in the slightest. The car arrives at 3, Adrian says, already turning for the door. Do not be tardy. He disappears before she can find a reply. Emily faces the mirror again, analyzing this new image. The dress, the bearing, the confidence worn like an armored shell. She had requested Adrian train her to survive in his world. She never once factored in the psychological price of being forced to leave it. The wedding day dawned beneath an oppressive gray sky that promised a storm which never broke. Emily was conscious before dawn, her gut twisted with a dread that was not for food, but for facing the Belmont estate in 6 hours beside Adrian Moretti. She stared at the flawless ceiling of her suite, a room that felt more like a stage than a bedroom, and tried to steady her breathing. Her phone buzzed. It was Maya. "It's go time. You've got this. Call me with all the details the second it's over." Emily sent back only a thumbs up. Forming words felt like an impossible effort. She willed herself out of bed and into a punishingly hot shower. She let the spray burn her, the one feeling that seemed real on a morning built on illusion. 20 minutes on, swathed in a luxurious towel, she saw Claudia waiting with a garment bag, her face implying Emily was already running late. "The mister wants you downstairs in 30 minutes, Claudia said, hanging the bag. "Glam Squad is here in 10. I can do it myself, Mr. Moretti insists." Naturally, he does. The next 3 hours became a blurred procession of strangers manipulating her body. The stylist twisted her hair into an elaborate French design she would instantly forget. The makeup artist spoke of color theory and the undertones of her skin. Not one of them asked how she was. Not one asked if she was petrified. No one saw the woman under the layers of cosmetics, standing on the very brink of an abyss. When they were finished, her own face in the mirror was that of a total stranger. The woman reflected back was costly, refined, someone who fit in with the wealthy, not someone who filed forms in an office that reeked of stale coffee and failure. And then the dress. The midnight blue creation Adrian had sworn would be ideal was practically sculpted to her body. While its neckline was modest, the material cascaded like liquid darkness, a silent testament to its staggering price. She was gazing, captivated, when his form materialized in the mirror behind her. He had traded his relaxed morning clothes for a charcoal gray suit so perfectly tailored it seemed like polished steel, forged for the social war to come. His dark hair was swept back, his jawline sharp and clear. The moment their eyes connected in the glass, a jolt shot through her. "You are perfect," he breathed. "I look like I'm about to have a panic attack." "That, too," he admitted. He closed the space between them, his scent surrounding her, an aroma of deep woods and a certain kind of threat. "They won't see that. They will only see the story we've created." Emily pivoted to face him directly. "And what if I fail the mission?" "You won't." "You can't know that for sure." "I do." Adrian's hand lifted to her necklace, his thumb grazing the charm, just as he did 3 days ago, but this touch felt far more charged. His fingers brushed her collarbone, and her breathing stopped. "Emily, look at me." She did as he asked. "You have prepared for 2 weeks for this," Adrian said, his voice a deep, anchoring hum. "You know the rules. You speak their language. You know exactly how to fill Nathaniel Ashford with a lifetime of regret. You just have to recall that this isn't an act. You are simply returning to the woman you were before you ever started to doubt yourself." "And who is that?" "Someone who doesn't need his approval." The words hit her like a key finally turning in a rusted lock. She had to believe him. She needed this reflection to be real. She needed the confidence she had practiced to be truly hers, not just a borrowed shield to be handed back when the night was over. But this close to Adrian, feeling the sheer weight of his attention, Emily could no longer tell what was genuine. "The car is waiting," he stated, stepping away, and just like that, the potent energy between them shattered. "Are you set?" "No, not at all." "Yes," Emily lied. The hour-long drive to the Belmont property was spent in absolute silence on her part. while Adrian took calls in what she guessed was Italian. His cadence was all business, sharp and final, as he settled matters that were obviously private. Over the past 2 weeks, she had deliberately refrained from asking what exactly Adrian's business was. It was not for a lack of interest. That was a low thrum beneath her skin. It was the understanding that the more she knew, the harder her departure would be, and that departure was an inescapable term of their deal. The estate appeared suddenly from the scenery like a relic from another time. Perfectly kept grounds surrounded a main house that looked airlifted from the European countryside. A line of expensive cars was already snaking up the drive, their gleaming bodies mirroring the last of the day's light. Emily's fingers started to shake. Adrian ended his conversation, his attention instantly snapping to her. Breathe. I am breathing. No, you're on the verge of hyperventilating. They are not the same thing. He reached over the console and covered her hand with his. It was the first time he had made such contact without it being part of their rehearsals. His palm was warm, his hold solid, but not tight. Emily, this is the plan. We go in. We are observed. We give them the exact performance they need to see, and then we leave. Nothing more. What if they ask about us? About our relationship? We will offer them the truth. Emily could only stare back at him. The whole truth? No, only the fragments required for our purpose. Adrian's thumb traced a slow, deliberate arc across her knuckles, a movement that was equal parts solace and subtle possession. We met through friends. We've been together for several months. We insist on our privacy. If they push, you pivot. You have practiced these scenarios. A simulation in a quiet room is nothing like the reality, with a gallery of people wishing for me to break. Then you will not break. The command was so absolute, so simple, as if she could merely decide not to shatter at the sight of Nathaniel, to ignore the fraudulence of this life she was wearing. But Adrian anchored her with his touch, his gaze holding a certainty that was utterly absent from her own mind. Emily could only capitulate. All right, she whispered. All right. The car door swung open. Adrian emerged, then offered his hand in a perfectly staged gesture. She took it, not out of need, but for the sake of the scene they were building. Or so she told herself. They entered a theater of the elite, a blizzard of empty compliments and air kisses. Emily knew the players from her life with Nathaniel, a universe of galas where smiles served as intricate masks. Their climb up the staircase created an instant, sharp fissure in the room's ambiance. Conversations died as every head turned. A low murmur spread through the assembly, building into the crushing weight of 100 pairs of eyes. A silent jury assembled to appraise, to judge, to condemn her. Her every nerve screamed for her to vanish. Instead, she lifted her chin, her hand tightening like a vice in Adrian's. Inside, the energy shift was a physical blow. The scrutiny was now overt. From the assembly, a half-recalled face from Nathaniel's dynasty, an aunt, she thought, approached with a smile of pure poison. Emily, what a perfectly lovely surprise! We had no idea you were coming. The unspoken message was a knife's edge. You were meant to be the grieving ghost. Emily mirrored the woman's hollow smile. I couldn't stay away. My history with Nathaniel doesn't stop me from wishing him happiness. The woman's eyes slid to Adrian, her curiosity a tangible thing. And you must be? Adrian Moretti, he answered, his handshake firm with an easy power born of countless such introductions. A pleasure. As she took his hand, her expression shifted from simple inquiry to sharp suspicion. Moretti, I know that name. It's a familiar one. And your relationship with Emily? We were introduced through mutual friends, Emily cut in, the rehearsed line falling from her lips with practiced smoothness. A few months ago. How wonderful. I'm sure we'll see you both inside. The ceremony starts in 20 minutes? The woman pivoted without waiting for a response, already murmuring to her companion. Emily let out a slow breath. That was survivable. Merely the opening scene, Adrian said quietly. The real test is when you see him. Emily had refused to let that image form, refusing to picture him after 3 months of total silence, how he might look or how he might simply look through her. They stepped into the main hall, a space staged to perfection like a magazine spread. Cascades of flowers flanked precise columns of white chairs, all lit by a sea of flickering candles. Guests found their seats, their low chatter echoing in the vaulted room. Emily and Adrian chose seats near the back, a vantage point for observation, not a place to hide. It was another one of Adrian's strategic lessons. The ceremony began with military precision. The music swelled. The bridal party, costumed in lavender, started their march. Then he appeared, Nathaniel standing at the altar, looking exactly as she remembered him. Tall, with the blonde hair and blue eyes of manufactured perfection, wearing a smile designed to win contracts and elections. A beautiful lie for anyone who didn't know the man behind it. That same smile was now aimed down the aisle, waiting. A knot of something tightened in Emily's stomach. It wasn't grief. That well had run dry months ago. It was the strange dislocation of looking at an old photograph of a person who was now a complete stranger. The bride appeared, eliciting a well-acted gasp from the groom. She was the portrait of dynastic breeding, in a gown that surely cost more than all of Emily's college debt. She moved down the aisle with tactical grace, her smile a permanent polished fixture. Reaching Nathaniel, he clasped her hand with the look of a man seizing his destiny. And maybe he was. Adrian's hand found hers under the fold of her dress, his fingers lacing through hers in a way that felt disarmingly real. She squeezed back. The ceremony was a predictable rite, orthodox, formal, and filled with promises of eternal love from two people finalizing a merger. The officiant spoke of commitment, of choosing love every single day. Emily wondered if Nathaniel and his bride had ever truly chosen anything, or if their lives were scripts written by parents who cared more for appearances than affection. When the call for objections came, a heavy silence descended, thick with all the things no one would ever say. Emily said nothing. 20 minutes later, the act was over. Nathaniel kissed his new wife. The room erupted in applause as the couple receded to the sounds of a string quartet playing a theme from some forgotten film. As he passed their aisle, Nathaniel's eyes found hers with shocking, deliberate aim. For one heartbeat, the world stopped. His gaze held hers, then flickered to Adrian, and a crack appeared in his perfect facade. Emily was not in ruins, but was instead a vision of cool composure. A strange feeling, shock, maybe even respect, crossed his face. Then the mask was back in place as he smiled at another guest. Emily finally breathed. Adrian murmured, "Are you composed?" She was the furthest thing from it. The reception was in a ballroom that dwarfed the chapel, a cathedral of crystal chandeliers, views of sprawling gardens, and plates that cost more than her rent. The room was a monument to affluence, all white and gold, a constant declaration of their status. Emily and Adrian were placed at a table on the periphery, away from the action, but perfectly visible. This was another of Adrian's strategies. Every single move was a calculated play. Their table mates were strangers who offered polite nods but no conversation. Emily was thankful for it. Her ability to pretend was completely gone, her emotional strength spent. A parade of courses began to appear. Emily just pushed the food around her plate, her heart hammering, intensely aware of the curious glances from the nearby tables. "They're watching us," she said under her breath. "Good," Adrian replied, taking a sip of wine with practiced calm. "That is the point. I thought the point was to show Nathaniel I didn't care. It is, and showing him requires you to hold their attention. Let them wonder about who you are now, who I am, and why we are here." He set down his glass, his eyes locking with hers. "Shall I tell you what they're thinking?" She wasn't sure she wanted to know. "They're seeing a resurrection. They see you with a man they can't place, and it's forcing them to reevaluate everything they thought they knew about you." His voice was a low hum, for her ears only. "They are considering the very real possibility that Nathaniel Ashford made a catastrophic mistake." Emily wanted to believe the whispers were about her newfound power, not her nerve. But a life spent in the shadows made this sudden spotlight feel like a dream. The music started for the first dance, a perfectly choreographed display by the bride and groom. Then the floor opened to everyone. Music washed over the enormous room. Bodies started to sway. From her seat, Emily watched, trying to stop her hands from shaking. Adrian stood and held out his hand. "We are dancing." It was not a question. Emily looked at the man who had spent 2 weeks rebuilding her from the ground up and felt a surge of panic. "I don't believe this was part of the plan. Our practice was in your apartment. This is the premiere. Now dance with me." She took his hand, knowing a refusal would cause a far bigger scene. He led her to the floor with an effortless grace, positioning them directly in the center, a stage designed for all to see. His hand settled on the small of her back, hers on his shoulder. In a breath, they were moving, swaying to a song she couldn't hear over the pounding in her own ears. "You're tense," Adrian noted. "I am terrified of this place, of being watched, of—" She stopped the thought. Of starting to think this act was real and forgetting it was all a lie. He pulled her a fraction of an inch closer, closing the space until she could feel his warmth through her dress. "Do you know what I see when I look at you? A woman playing a desperate game of make-believe. I see someone whose act became the truth about 3 days ago." His voice was low and intimate, a vibration that ran through her. "You're waiting for permission from the world to be the person you've already become, Emily. That permission will never come. It has to be taken." Before she could think of a reply, she saw them. Nathaniel and his bride, dancing far too close. She tried to look away, but Nathaniel's eyes found hers again, holding on for just a moment too long. "He's watching," Adrian said softly. "I know." "What are you feeling?" Emily had to stop and truly ask herself the question. Weeks ago, his stare would have shattered her, leaving her disgraced at the gleaming floor. Yet tonight, secured by Adrian's touch, shielded by a fortune's worth of fabric, the sensation was foreign, a void where emotion should be. No victory, no satisfaction, no fury, only a deep, quiet stillness. "It feels like watching a stranger," she decided. Adrian's hand tightened almost imperceptibly at her waist. "Good." After 2 more songs, Emily indicated she was leaving. She excused herself and escaped to the terrace into the biting autumn air. The grounds, lit by a spectral glow, provided a counterfeit peace. She had barely 30 seconds of truce before a ghost from her past appeared, and it was not Adrian. Emily. Hearing her name, she faced him. Nathaniel, reborn after 3 months away. His look, his rhythm, the structure of his false smile, a warmth that never touched his cold eyes, was unchanged. "I admit I thought you wouldn't be here," he started. Emily held his gaze, her expression perfectly still. "Your invitation brought me here. True, I just presumed the thought would be unpleasant. And why would I have wanted to miss this?" Her question seemed to throw him off balance. "Emily, I was the one who ended our engagement. I chose someone else. Most women in your shoes would have burned this invitation, but I am not most women." Exactly. His eyes darted to the ballroom, subconsciously seeking his new wife. "No, you are not. You are different." "Thank you." "That wasn't a compliment," he replied. A chill snaked its way down her spine. "Then what was it?" He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a low murmur. "An observation. You came with a stranger in a priceless dress, acting like our 2 years meant nothing. It is strange." "Strange?" "Yes. I am worried about you, Em. I will not let you make a ruinous mistake out of pain. That nickname." "Em." His name for her. It struck her with the weight of a physical blow. She had forgotten his gift for hiding contempt and false kindness, his way of turning concern into a weapon. "I appreciate the thought," Emily said, her voice like stone. "But I am fine. In fact, I am better than fine. And you seem quite desperate to control the story. I only want to help you avoid a bad situation." "A bad situation? Adrian Moretti?" Nathaniel spoke the name as if it were venom. "Do you have any idea who that man is or what he can do?" "I know exactly who he is." "Then you know he is not someone to be involved with?" "Emily, you are a paralegal. You are not prepared for a relationship with a man like him." It was so typically Nathaniel, so sure of himself and his right to direct her life, she almost laughed. Here was the man she nearly married on his wedding day, schooling her on her inability to choose her friends. "You are right," Emily admitted quietly. "I am not equipped to handle a man like Adrian. But maybe that is exactly the point. Perhaps for 2 years, I was precisely the woman you needed. Safe, predictable, and entirely conventional. And look where it led. So now I am trying a different direction. I am choosing another path, and I do not need your approval." His expression froze into a hard mask. "I am only trying to help you." "No. You are trying to soothe your conscience because my life didn't fall apart when you left. You wanted me to break. You needed my tears to prove your own worth." Emily moved closer, her eyes locked on his. "But I did not shatter. I am here. I am complete. And that truth is absolutely destroying you. That is a lie. It is the truth. And for that I am truly grateful. If you had not left me, I might never have seen how small I made myself to fit inside your world. How much I gave up to become your perfect woman instead of myself. So thank you, Nathaniel. Thank you for picking another woman. You did me an enormous favor." As she turned to leave, his hand grabbed her arm. "Emily, wait. Let her go." Adrian's voice cut through the twilight like a razor's edge. He had appeared from the darkness. So quickly he must have seen it all. His grip on Nathaniel's wrist was not violent, but a measured force that commanded instant submission. "We were just talking," Nathaniel faltered, his face paling as he fought to appear calm. "And right now this conversation is over." Adrian's voice was quiet. It did not need to be loud. The threat was in every word, in the way he stood between them. You should go back to your wife. She is likely wondering where you are. Nathaniel looked ready to argue, but saw the look in Adrian's eyes, a silent vow of pure violence, and he backed down. He flinched, straightened his suit, and forced a tight smile. Enjoy the rest of your night, he told Emily, then turned and walked quickly away. As the crowd consumed him, Emily felt her composure finally break. Adrian was there at once, his hands a steady anchor on her arms. Are you hurt? He demanded sharply. No, I am fine. He just startled me. He touched you. His reasons do not matter. Adrian's voice was level, but laced with a poison Emily had never heard before. It was the sound of possession, of fierce protection, and of death. No one lays a hand on you without your permission. Ever. She looked up at him. The man in a pact of pure lies, a pact now feeling frighteningly real as the walls around her heart began to fall. Adrian, we are leaving. Now. What? The party has barely started. The party is over. His tone allowed no debate. You showed up. You proved you were over him. You faced Nathaniel Ashford with the raw truth. The mission is complete. He grabbed her hand, already heading for the door. We are leaving before I do something that makes tomorrow's news. Emily did not resist. She let him lead her through the hall, past unaware guests and the empty, shining spectacle. They were in the car in less than 5 minutes, and as they drove from the Belmont estate, Emily could at last take a deep breath. Through the back window, she saw the estate become a dot of light, a world almost hers, and felt the last tie to Nathaniel Ashford finally snap. It was over, truly over. She had survived. Adrian was on his phone, speaking harsh, businesslike Italian. Emily watched him in the dim light, seeing his hard jaw, the tick of a muscle at bad news, the pure force in every movement. This was the real Adrian Moretti, not the patient teacher of the last 2 weeks, not the charming man from the dance floor. Here was the builder of empires, its foundations laid with loyalty, terror, and precise gambles. Emily had agreed to one night inside his world. Except it did not feel like one night anymore. It felt like she had crossed a line she could never return from. She had asked him to make her strong, and he had, but she never imagined that to thrive in his world meant she could never go back to her own. 30 minutes later, the car stopped outside his building. He ended the call and faced her, his face a blank mask. Thank you, Emily whispered, for everything, for... Do not thank me yet. Something in his voice made her heart pound against her ribs. What do you mean? Adrian just watched her for a long, heavy moment, an unknown emotion stirring deep in his eyes. He then got out of the car and held the door open for her. Come upstairs, he said. We need to talk. Her hands still shook as they rode the elevator up. She locked them together, watching the floors pass, aware of his quiet, powerful presence next to her. The air between them had changed, now filled with something missing just 2 hours before. Or maybe it was always there, and she was too busy surviving to notice it. The elevator doors slid open right into his penthouse. He walked in first, tossing a $5,000 jacket onto a chair. Emily followed, feeling completely lost in a place she knew but had never felt a part of. A drink? Adrian asked, already at the bar. I do not think that is a good idea. His question was for show. He poured 2 glasses of a dark amber liquid, walked over and put one in her hand. Sit down before you fall over. Emily dropped onto the sofa's edge, grateful for the command to stop pretending she was composed. 6 hours in the shoes left an ache deep in her bones. A sharper pain pulsed at her scalp from the pins anchoring her hair. But these were mere echoes of a deeper soul weariness, the kind born from watching the man you loved marry someone else while you feigned serenity. She drank. The liquor's fire was a welcome, clarifying sting. Across the room, Adrian stared through the panoramic windows at the city's electric glow. At some point, he'd loosened his tie and the collar of his shirt. Emily's gaze caught on the exposed skin of his throat before she tore it away. "You were magnificent tonight," he observed, his voice low, his back to her. "My only contribution was praying not to faint." "You stood before the man who broke you and declared yourself healed. You moved across the dance floor while a room of vultures waited for you to falter. You held your spine straight when every instinct screamed to run." He turned, finally meeting her eyes. "That is the opposite of nothing, Emily. It felt hollow, like I was a ghost inhabiting a stranger's skin." "That is because you're still waiting for someone to grant you permission to exist." Adrian drank, his eyes holding hers with physical weight. "When will you believe the woman you've been for 14 days is not an act? This power is not a loan from me. It is you. It's who you were before Nathaniel Ashford taught you to shrink." Emily placed her glass down, her hand trembling. "There's no way you can know that. I can. Because for 2 weeks I have watched you wage a war against yourself. I have seen you apologize for taking up space, for having a thought, for breathing as if your presence were an intrusion. And each time I had to remind you that you needed no one's approval, that you were already whole." He moved, sitting the coffee table in front of her. "Do you see the difference between you and Nathaniel's bride?" Emily could only manage a shake of her head, her voice gone. "She has an inherent sense of worth," he explained. "Not from being better, but because nobody ever convinced her she was less. That, Emily, is available to you. You can own this world, but you have to stop seeking its approval first." His words hit like a physical impact, cracking something sealed inside her since Nathaniel left. Tear threatened, but she fought them back. "I don't know how," she whispered. "You do. Tonight was proof. Now you just have to keep going." Adrian reached out, and the simple motion of tucking a stray curl behind her ear felt so illicit it broke every rule she knew about him. His hand lingered, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw, and Emily's breath caught. They were on a dangerous precipice. This closeness, the current arcing between them, was untethered to their arrangement and entirely connected to her 2-week spiral into needing a man who was only a tool. His phone buzzed, shattering the spell. Adrian snatched his hand back, his face closing off, the transition from open to guarded taking less than a second. He glanced at the screen and his jaw locked. "I need to take this," he said, already standing. "Wait here." He disappeared into his office, a flood of clipped Italian spilling out just before the door sealed shut. Emily was left floating in the enormous, quiet apartment, her heart racing as she tried to process what had just occurred. She raised her glass, the final swallow, a welcome, burning comfort. She stood, slipped out of her heels, and started toward the guest room. She had to shed the dress, scrub her face clean, and let down her hair. She had to find herself again, even if that person was now unrecognizable. The guest suite was an oasis of cold, sterile order, exactly as she'd left it. A stranger stared back at Emily from the full-length mirror. This woman still had poise, an elegance that could command a ballroom. Yet a new fire burned in her eyes. something that looked like resolve. Her fingers were on the zipper of her gown when a shout penetrated the penthouse's supposedly soundproof walls. Emily stilled, hand frozen, and strained to listen. The yelling continued. It was Adrian's voice, raw and commanding, speaking the same rapid Italian he used on his calls. This time, however, a different note was woven through it. A rough, strained quality that sounded like desperation. Without a second thought, Emily slipped out of the suite and moved silently toward Adrian's office. The door was cracked open. Through the gap, she saw him pacing, phone pressed hard against his ear, his free hand raked through his hair in a gesture of unraveling control. He barked a command into the phone. Emily couldn't translate the words, but she knew the tone. It was the sound of a catastrophic mistake unfolding. He ended the call by slamming the phone onto his desk and stood braced against it, vibrating with rage. Every instinct screamed for her to flee, to return to the silence of her room and pretend she'd heard nothing. Instead, the door swung inward on her touch. Adrian's gaze shot toward her. For a suspended moment, she saw something untamed in his eyes. Rage, anguish, and a shadow that chilled her to the bone. Then the mask of composure slid back down. My instructions were to remain downstairs. There was shouting, and you chose to investigate the explosion. I thought perhaps you needed. Her words dissolved. I'm not sure what. A hollow bark of a sound left Adrian's throat. What I need is for my orders to be followed. He went on. Some things are buried for a reason, not meant to be unearthed. He paused, commanding her to leave him for the night. Yet she persisted, inquiring what was amiss. His response was a sharp warning to overstep no further. Adrian, I said it is nothing. His voice turned to frost. This is a business matter. Do not look at me as though we are... The words died on his tongue, the sentence left hanging in the air. As though we are what? She breathed. He then shattered the fragile truth between them. As if any part of this is real. The words were a brutal strike, yet she met his gaze unflinching. It feels real, she answered. He turned on her. You just want a savior, and I was foolish enough to let you cast me in the role. Adrian started pacing, putting a physical distance between them. This isn't your world. You had a crisis. I provided a solution. The arrangement is finished. We are done. She repeated his term. The solution is rendered, her voice hollow. Exactly. You went to the wedding, you got your closure. Our business is concluded. That's it? That's it. He refused to look at her, his eyes fixed on some distant, empty point beyond her. You can have the room for the night, but I want you gone in the morning. So, I meant to return to the life I had before. The finality of it was crushing. You're kicking me out. He tried to rephrase it. I am closing out our contract. She rejected his framing. Is that what this is? 'Cause it feels a lot like you're discarding me now that I am an inconvenience. You are not an inconvenience. This was always temporary. And then she delivered her own truth. Liar. The single word breached his walls. You're lying to me or yourself, but you felt something tonight. He became a fortress of denial. I felt nothing. He twisted the knife, suggesting she was projecting feelings born of weakness. Then came the killing blow. I will not be the next man to ruin your life, Emily. The cruelty of it stole her breath. She stood there, a queen he had crowned, and watched him burn her kingdom down. And then she recovered. "You're right," she said, her tone unnervingly calm. "You're so much worse than Nathaniel. He was at least honest about his betrayal." With that, she turned and walked away. She made it to her room, her expression carved from stone, shut the door, and broke into a million pieces. She wept for the future she'd lost with Nathaniel. She wept for the ghost of a girl she had been only 2 weeks prior. But her deepest grief was for Adrian, the architect of her reconstruction, who had demolished his own creation the moment their controlled reality fractured. Sleep was impossible. She lay awake in blackness. Then, sometime around 2 or 3 a.m., she heard his footsteps pause outside her door. He lingered there for a long moment, then moved on. A small crack in his armor. She wondered if his night was as agonizing as her own. Dawn arrived, and Emily packed with robotic efficiency. She left the couture gowns and the expensive jewelry. She took only what was hers, including the ring Adrian had despised. As she was leaving, Claudia appeared, pristine as ever. "Mr. Moretti has arranged a car for you." Emily's refusal was sharp and absolute. "No, I'll take the subway." He insisted. She held the housekeeper's gaze. "Please tell Mr. Moretti their business is over and that she wants nothing further from him." Without waiting for a response, she walked out. The 40-minute train journey was a blur. She watched her reflection, seeing the whole narrative of her 2-week ascent from invisible to invincible and back to nothing. Her old apartment was a perfect relic of her former self, a chaotic shrine to a smaller life, haunted by the ghost of 3-week-old takeout. It was like trying to slip into a skin she had already shed. She let her bag fall and collapsed onto the couch. As if summoned, her phone vibrated. It was Maya, demanding a full report. But how could she possibly explain the last 14 days? How do you distill, "I made a deal with a dangerous man, vanquished my demons, and then he destroyed me," into a text? After several failed attempts, she simply typed, "It's over. I'll explain later." She spent the rest of the day trying to re-inhabit her old life, but it no longer fit. The laundry was done, the kitchen spotless, her laptop screen glowed, a monument to a workday she had no strength to begin. Her mind was a loop of Adrian, his gaze holding her like a treasure, then discarding her like poison, and the raw, undeniable fact of her own surrender to him. As dusk bled into the room, a quiet clarity formed. The Emily she had been was gone. Not because he had broken her, but because she had finally seen her own strength. She could not build a life around a man who had so thoroughly walled her out. It was time to build her own empire. Using the weapons Adrian himself had given her, she would start by raising her past, 3 years spent as a ghost. As she typed her resignation, the shrill ring of a secure line broke the quiet. An instinct she couldn't explain forced her to answer. "Emily Carter." A strange man's voice on the line. "Who is this?" "My name is Marco. I'm an associate of Adrian Moretti. He requested I make contact." Her heart seemed to stop. "Why?" "A situation has developed. He insisted you be warned. People may have questions about last night. If they do, you call this number and you say nothing." "What kind of situation?" "I cannot give you details, but Mr. Moretti has made your safety his highest concern." Her safety? A deep, invasive cold spread through her. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means be aware of your surroundings. If you are followed or approached, you call us. Is that understood?" "Marco, what is actually happening?" But the line went dead. She sat on her couch, completely still, trying to process the wreckage of that single call. Your security is his highest concern. This was not finished. Whatever lethal world Adrian moved through, one that sparked furious Italian arguments at 2 a.m, had just claimed her. One night in his orbit, and she was now part of the collateral damage. Her hands began to shake, but it wasn't fear, it was a clean, sharp rage. Adrian throws her out, declares their contract fulfilled, then dispatches his men with cryptic warnings. He had made her a player in a game without ever explaining the rules. If he imagined she would cower in her apartment and wait for his next command, he was profoundly mistaken. Emily collected her keys and walked out with a single, clear objective. No plan, no rehearsed speech, just a destination. She went to the Crimson Lounge. It seemed diminished in the harsh light of day, stripped of its evening allure. She saw the same hostess from before, whose eyes widened in recognition. "Miss Carter, I need to speak with Adrian." "He's not available today." "I don't care. Tell him I'm here." "I'm sorry, that isn't possible." "Inform him," Emily said, her voice now edged with steel, "that if he won't see me, I'm going to walk into that ballroom and ask very loudly what kind of business needs to issue safety warnings to its associates. I'm sure the other guests would be very interested." The hostess's professional calm never wavered, but a brief panic flashed in her eyes. It was a silent admission that this woman was not bluffing. "One moment, please," she said, before vanishing behind the doors. Emily waited, her heart hammering, fully expecting his refusal. 5 minutes later, the guard who had first escorted her appeared and nodded her forward. The hallway to Adrian's office was a disorienting echo of a place she both knew and did not recognize at all. She had walked this corridor once before, a desperate woman with nothing left to lose. This time she was powered by righteous fury. The guard knocked twice, then melted back into the hall. Emily didn't wait. She pushed the door open herself. Adrian stood as a silhouette against the vast window, a king surveying his domain, just as he had been the night before. He didn't turn. "It was a mistake for you to come here," he said, his voice flat. "I got a call from a man named Marco who spoke of threats to my security. I assume you can clarify. He told you everything you need to know. That's not a real answer. It's the only one you'll get." Emily crossed the room until she stood directly behind him, close enough to see his weary reflection in the glass. The man was a portrait of sheer exhaustion, as if he had waged a silent war all through the night. "Tell me what happened at the wedding," she demanded. "It has nothing to do with you." "Marco's call says otherwise." Marco was being cautious. "Stop it, Adrian." She moved, stepping directly into his line of sight, forcing his eyes to meet hers. "Do not treat me like something fragile that needs to be hidden from the world. For 2 weeks you taught me how to be fearless, how to command respect, how to stand my ground. You don't get to order me back into the shadows now." A muscle jumped in his jaw. "You don't understand what you're asking for." "Then make me understand." "I can't." "Why?" "Because your ignorance is the only thing keeping you safe." A harsh, dry laugh escaped her. "That's rich, coming from the man who dragged me into this chaos. You made me a piece on your board, Adrian. The moment you took me to that wedding, the moment you coached me on how to belong, you made me a part of this. Don't pretend you're pushing me away to protect me. You're protecting yourself." "You're right." Adrian's voice was a hollow whisper. "I am protecting myself, because letting you get any closer would be a fatal mistake." "Why?" Because everyone I allow into my world either gets erased, disappears, or spends the rest of their life wishing they hadn't. Because this world, the one you think is so glamorous, it dismantles people, and you've been dismantled enough for a lifetime. His confession struck her with the force of a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. She looked at him then, truly seeing past the armor of his suit and the cultivated danger beyond the walls he had built. She saw the man who had helped a stranger simply because he knew how it felt to be invisible. The man who had trained her for war because deep down he was still fighting his own. "What happened at the wedding?" she asked again, her voice soft with a new awareness. Adrian turned away, pressing his palms against the cool glass of the window. He stood there for a long, heavy moment, shrouded in silence. Then he told her the truth. "There was an attempt on my life." The words hung in the air between them. "What?" "Not at the ceremony. After we left, a car followed us from the estate. 3 men. They would have finished it if my driver hadn't felt that something was wrong." His eyes met hers in the dark reflection. "The call I took when we returned, it was my head of security. He confirmed they had the men. He also confirmed the price on my head is now so high that the hunters are getting reckless." "But you're okay." "I'm not wounded. You're not wounded. No one was hurt," he bit out, the words thick with a bitter poison. "But the client who ordered the hit now knows I was there, and they know you were with me. That makes you leverage." A cold weakness shot through Emily's knees. Leverage, a pressure point, something to break to get to him. Adrian finally turned to face her directly. "That's why Marco called. That's why I sent you away. Because the moment you walked into my world, a target appeared on your back, and I cannot." His voice broke. "I cannot protect you when my own presence is the very thing that puts you in danger. So I'm supposed to just go home and hope they forget about me?" "Correct. And if they don't, you'll take care of it." Emily could only shake her head in disbelief. "Do you really think I'm going to hide in my apartment and wait for you to solve this? After everything you taught me, do you think I can just become invisible again?" "That is exactly what I expect," he countered. "Because the alternative is watching you get caught in the crossfire, and I will not let that happen." "You don't have the right to make that choice for me." "I do, when it's my war that's putting you at risk." Emily stepped closer, so near she could see the raw fatigue in his eyes and the tension cording his neck, the sheer will holding him together. "Answer one question," she said, her voice dropping. "When you sent me away last night, was it because our deal was over, or were you already trying to get me out of the line of fire?" Adrian didn't answer. He didn't have to. The truth was written all over his face. "I'm staying," Emily said. "I am not going back to my apartment to hide. I am not deleting the last 2 weeks. You brought me into this world, Adrian, and now I am part of the problem." "Emily, no." "You will not push me away for my own good. You will not decide that I am too weak for what comes next. I am standing right here, knowing what they tried to do to you, and I am not running. So you either tell me everything, or I will leave this office and find someone who will." For a long second, Adrian just looked at her, completely and utterly stunned into silence. Then, the atmosphere changed. A smile bloomed on his lips. It was the familiar, sharp grin from their first meeting, but now edged with a surprising warmth. "You are utterly illogical," he noted. "I learn from the best." He gave a slight shake of his head, yet Emily saw the fortifications around him begin to crumble. She could almost picture the frantic calculus behind his eyes, pitting the immense risk of her involvement against the fallout of leaving her out. Finally, he spoke. "If I tell you everything, if I drag you into the depths of this, there's no coming back. You grasp that, don't you?" "I do." "You'll know things that make you a part of this. You will be just as guilty as me." "Good." In 2 steps, Adrian eliminated the space between them. He lifted a hand to her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone, an echo of the night before. "This is your last chance to walk away," he murmured, his voice a deep vibration. Emily met his stare. "I'm not walking away." "Then you stay glued to my side, because things are about to get exceptionally dangerous, and I need to know you're prepared." "I'm prepared. We'll see about that." His hand dropped as he moved to his desk, picking up a phone and making a call. The instant it connected, a flood of rapid Italian poured from him, the tone pure, undiluted command. He ended the call, his eyes finding hers. "Marco is gathering your things from your apartment. You'll be staying here until this is over. Adrian, this isn't a discussion. If you're in, you follow my rules. Rule 1. You do not leave my sight until I can guarantee your safety." Emily fought back the urge to argue. She yearned to say she didn't need a protector, that she could handle herself, but she was stepping into a world she couldn't comprehend. She knew nothing of who wanted Adrian dead, their reasons, or what they might do if they found her. So she gave a single, sharp nod. "Understood." Adrian watched her a second longer, then went on. "You asked about the wedding. The truth is, I've been at war with a rival crew for nearly a year. The usual conflicts, territory, business practices. But it has escalated. They started hitting my people, so I hit back. Last night was a message from them to show that nowhere is off limits, not even the wedding of the senator's daughter. So now they know about me. They know I was with someone. Whether they know who you are or what you mean to me is unclear, but I'm not taking any chances. What you mean to me." The phrase hung in the air, heavier than any confession. "What's our next move?" Emily asked, shattering the tense quiet. "Our next move? We finish this. I find the man who gave the order. I will make him understand the price for touching what is mine, and I will end this war before anyone else gets hurt." "How?" Adrian's smile turned feral. "By doing what I do best, by making people regret the day they ever underestimated me." He started for the door, then stopped, glancing over his shoulder. This was a precipice. Adrian's question less an inquiry than a final chance to retreat before fantasy collapsed into fact. For Emily, the choice triggered a mental accounting. The cramped apartment that symbolized her old life, the firm where she'd been invisible for 3 years, the false existence she built but never occupied. This was set against the raw reality of the last 2 weeks, of actual living, of seeing Nathaniel without emotion, and of being drawn to a dangerous man who saw her for who she truly was. Her words, "I'm certain," were a death sentence for her past self. Taking Adrian's hand was a deliberate step into battle. The war room, as Adrian called it, was a secret world beneath the crimson lounge, a place she never suspected until he led her past a service lift that required a key card and thumbprint. The room was a stark chamber of concrete and steel, its walls a living mosaic of security feeds showing a dozen angles of the city. 3 men stood inside, their talk halting as Adrian entered with Emily. Marco broke from the group, his expression a mix of worry for Emily and deference to his boss. "Boss," he said, "we've got something." Adrian's reply was laced with weary acceptance. When don't we? He moved toward the main screen. What am I looking at? Footage from the Belmont estate from last night, about 20 minutes after you left. Marco tapped a key, and the image zoomed in on the parking area. 3 men are visible, lingering by a black sedan, deep in conversation. One takes out a phone, makes a quick call, and then the trio gets into the car and drives off. It's the same team that's been tailing you. We followed their car to a warehouse on the east side. They were gone by the time our guys got there. But you got something? We confirmed they were there, and we found this. Marco handed Adrian a manila folder filled with surveillance shots. Looks like they've been on you for at least 2 weeks. Adrian began flipping through the photos, his expression unreadable as he scanned the dozens of images. Emily could only make out pieces. Adrian leaving the Crimson Lounge. Adrian sliding into his car. Adrian walking into his apartment building. Adrian with her. There were at least 4 shots of them together, driving to the wedding on the Belmont grounds, dancing, and 1 violating picture taken through his penthouse window, showing them in his living room on that first night. The knowledge landed like a punch to her gut. They were watching us. They were watching me, Adrian corrected, his voice cutting. You were collateral. It amounts to the same thing. Emily moved closer, peering over his shoulder. In each photo, she saw her own blissful ignorance, laughing, talking, living in his world, completely unaware that her every move was being catalogued. How long was this going on? Long enough to learn your entire life, where you live, where you work, who you know. Marco's tone was both apologetic and blunt. I'm sorry, Miss Carter. We didn't know they'd widen their net until we got these. Who are they? Emily demanded. Who's in charge of this? The 3 men exchanged a look. Adrian shut the folder and faced her. His name is Vincent Calabresi. He runs the East Side. Gambling, protection rackets, and some very shady import-export business. We had a truce for years. He had his turf, I had mine. It worked for everyone. Adrian's jaw tightened. 6 months ago, that understanding dissolved. One of his crews crossed into my territory, started leaning on businesses I protect. I sent word that it was unacceptable. He sent word he didn't care. So things got worse. How much worse? People got hurt, property was destroyed, they crossed lines that are meant to be sacred. Adrian looked straight at her. I won't lie to you, Emily, and say I'm innocent in this. I've hit Calabresi's operation, and I've hit it hard. But what he's doing is worse. Now he thinks the only way to win is to make it personal. Hitting me at a wedding, a place I thought was safe, packed with civilians and politicians. Adrian's voice went cold as stone. It was a complete violation of the code. There were unwritten laws you just didn't break, and this man had taken a sledgehammer to all of them. The realization shook Emily as she tried to reconcile the man before her with a man who talked of turf wars and rules written in blood. What's your next move? She asked, her voice low. To end it. Adrian's eyes shot to Marco. Do we have a solid location on Calabresi? He's been a ghost, using a string of safe houses gone by dawn, but we're sure about tomorrow night. Marco put a new photo on the monitor. A single warehouse in a forgotten industrial park. A big shipment is coming in. Valuable cargo he'll want to oversee himself. Our intel puts him there between 8 and midnight. Is this source solid? 100%. He's one of Calabresi's own lieutenants, fed up with the new management. Adrian stared at the grainy photograph, the gears turning. How many men will he have with him? We figure 10, maybe 12, not counting the muscle for this shipment. We'll be outnumbered. We're always outnumbered. That's never been a problem. A predator's smile touched Adrian's lips. Get everyone ready. I want full tactical gear, non-lethals if you can, and eyes on every single exit. If Calabresi even thinks of running, I need to know before his fingers graze the doorknob. And Miss Carter, Emily's voice sliced through the briefing, halting Adrian mid-sentence. I'm going. 4 pairs of eyes fixed on her. Adrian's composure as a commander shattered, replaced by stark disbelief. That is out of the question. You told me I was part of this. That doesn't mean I wait in your fortress while you fight my battles. That is precisely its meaning. No, it means I decide what I am willing to lose. She crossed her arms, her stare a challenge he couldn't deflect. You're facing the man who tried to take me, the obsessive phantom who has haunted us for 2 weeks. I have a right to witness the conclusion. You have a right to your life, which you will forfeit in a firefight with paid killers. Then show me how not to die. For a long, heavy moment, Adrian just stared. He then glanced at Marco. Clear the room. Marco's team vanished without a word, the door sealing their exit. The silence that fell was a physical weight. Emily, Adrian's tone was dangerously calm. I grasp your need for involvement. I know you believe you're owed some kind of justice or finality or whatever you seek from this. But this is not the wedding. This isn't some gala where a sharp word is the deepest cut. People will bleed, some may die, and my focus must be on ending the threat, not shielding you from a stray round. I understand that. Do you? Because from where I stand, you see this as a game with no grasp of its finality. The words hit her like a physical blow. The woman she once was would have folded, apologized, and fled. But 14 days in his world had forged a new resolve. She would not break. I am not treating this like a game, she said, her voice low. I'm treating it as the outcome of my own choices. I chose to find you. I chose to be your partner at that reception. I chose to be here instead of running. And I am choosing to see this through. Not for a thrill, but because being a bystander while you take the risks is a person I refuse to be. This is not your battle to wage. It became my battle when he took those photos, when Calabresi made me the weapon to be used against you. Emily closed the distance, near enough to see the deep lines of weariness in his face. You can't shield me by locking me away, Adrian. You can only shield me by making me strong. So I'm asking, make me strong. Adrian's eyelids fell shut. For a heartbeat, he looked older than his 35 years, shouldering an impossible load. When he met her gaze again, his face was a war between capitulation and respect. You won't let this go, will you? No. Not even if I told you it was the single most suicidal decision you could ever make. She saw the ghost of a smile as he gave a slight shake of his head. Very well, but you follow my orders to the letter. No improvisation, no heroics. You are a civilian. Understood? Crystal clear. And when I tell you to run, you will run. No argument, no second thoughts. You will be gone. Is that a deal? Doubt flickered across Emily's expression. Every fiber of her being screamed to say no, to promise she would never leave his side. But his gaze told her this was the only term, the cost of admission. Deal, she finally breathed. Adrian lifted his phone. Marco, come back. and find someone who can teach a person to survive in the next 6 hours. The following 6 hours were the most brutal of Emily's existence. The trainer Marcos sent was a woman named Sophia, a compact engine of lethal calm who could disarm a man with a look. She never questioned the impossible timeline for a crash course in staying alive. She just began. They started with the basics: how to ground her feet, how to use her center of gravity, how to turn an enemy's force against them. Sophia was brutally efficient, offering no accolades, only constant, sharp corrections. When Emily hit the mat for the 10th time, she earned no pity. "Again!" Sophia ordered, her voice flat as Emily gasped for breath. "He grabs you from the back. What do you do?" Emily's mind raced for the sequence. Drop your weight, turn into him, drive an elbow back. It was a clumsy failure. "Too slow," Sophia said, deflecting the telegraphed blow. "You're broadcasting your move. He'll see it coming and break you. The illusion of weakness is your armor until the second you strike. Again." For 3 straight hours, that was her world. When Sophia finally called a halt, Emily's body was a mural of blossoming aches and deep bruises. Still, she had gained a flicker of instinct. How to break a hold, to feel for the weakness in a grip, for the moves that might buy her precious seconds. She knew it wasn't enough, it could never be, but it was something. Just then, Adrian materialized in the doorway, his face unreadable. "The assessment?" he asked Sophia. "She's a fast study. A real fight would tear her apart, but she might last long enough to escape." Sophia tossed a water bottle at Emily. "Drill these moves until you don't have to think." Then she was gone. Emily drank nearly half before facing Adrian. "Tell me the truth. Am I just going to be a liability tomorrow?" "Honestly, yes, that is the most probable result." He crossed the space between them in a few long strides. "But I would rather have you as a liability I can see than as a worry I can't. This way, if it all goes wrong, I am there." "That's hardly reassuring." "It wasn't meant to be." Adrian reached up, his touch impossibly gentle as he brushed a stray piece of hair from her cheek. The gesture was growing familiar, an intimate spark that sent her heart thundering against the agony in her muscles. "Emily, you can still back out. Stay here while we handle Culebra, and no one will ever blame you." "I'd blame myself." "Why? For being smart enough to sidestep a death sentence?" "Because I'm done watching from the sidelines while other people take my risks." Emily set the bottle down, her eyes locked on his. "My whole life has been an exercise in fading into the background, in making choices to go unnoticed. And for what? A fiancé who found me completely forgettable, a career where I was essentially a ghost, a home that felt more like a waiting area than an actual life." "And you think walking into this chaos is the answer?" "I think choosing my own danger is better than having safety forced on me by people who don't care what I want." Emily stepped in closer, the heat from his body an undeniable presence. "You showed me this. You showed me I could be someone who takes up space instead of someone who apologizes for breathing. So don't you dare ask me to shrink back now just because it's the safer option." Adrian's hand came up to her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw with a tenderness that defied the hurricane within him. "You're going to get yourself killed," he whispered. "Not if you teach me how to live." "I'm trying to. You refuse to listen." "Then make me listen." The air between them was electric, thick with everything left unsaid. Emily saw the war in his eyes, the guardian who wanted to lock her away from all harm against the man who saw the truth of her defiance. The instinct to shove her away fought the need to pull her closer, and the need won. Adrian erased the last inch between them, and his mouth captured hers. It held no softness, none of the questions of a first kiss. It was a raw, bruising claim that tasted of the magnificent violence he kept leashed. Emily met his kiss with a matching ferocity, her fingers twisting in his shirt as a shockwave coursed through her, like a starving woman finally given food. When they broke apart, breathless, Adrian pressed his forehead to hers. "This is an epic mistake," he gasped. "Maybe? You need to get out of this room right now before it gets worse." A real laugh, not his usual cold, sharp sound, escaped him. "It's already too late." Yes, it was far too late. They stayed in that dangerous space, caught between who they were and who they were about to become. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the moment. He pulled back, the professional mask snapping flawlessly into place as he checked the screen. "Marco has the final plan for tomorrow. We need to go over it." "Okay." A ghost of warmth lingered on Emily's lips, her heart hammering against her ribs, but she forced her mind to clear. "What do I need to know?" It turned out she needed to know the full architecture of the assault. For the next 2 hours, they stood in the command center while Marco laid out the operation with chilling precision. The warehouse on the east side was isolated enough to prevent civilian casualties, but riddled with escape routes. Calabrizzi's shipment was due at 8. Marco's source confirmed he would be on site to receive it. Adrian's strategy was a thing of brutal elegance. They would surround the building, seal every exit, and force a confrontation entirely on their terms. In a perfect world, Calabrizzi would grasp the nature of his predicament and capitulate. In this one, an eruption of gunfire felt tragically inevitable. Emily's part was elegantly simple. Stay within the vehicle beside Marco, remain unseen, and never leave the car unless commanded. It was the bargain Adrian had demanded. She could be a spectator to the storm, but she was forbidden to step into its path. With no other choice, Emily agreed, but an icy conviction coiled in her stomach. No battle plan ever survives the first bullet. The rest of the evening blurred into a tense montage as Adriana's operatives materialized like specters, their faces unknown to Emily, each a study in lethal grace honed by years of conflict. They checked their armaments, murmuring over contingencies Emily dared not imagine. At the center of it all was Adrian, a calm eye in the hurricane, the architect of empires now building a redoubt from their shared purpose. He was convincing them all of their victory, that they could breach Calabrizzi's fortress and walk away whole. Emily fought to share his certainty. As dusk bled into night, she was ordered to his penthouse to rest. She tried. In a guest room that felt more like a cage of gold, she shut her eyes against the rising panic in her mind. It was useless. At midnight, she surrendered and discovered Adrian in his study, buried in paperwork, looking as haunted by the lack of sleep as she was. "Sleep won't come?" he asked, his gaze fixed on the document. "Tomorrow is the only thing I see." "Then you've joined the club." He set aside the file he was reading and gestured toward a chair. "What is troubling you?" "Everything, nothing." The memory of their kiss hung in the air between them, the reality that in under 12 hours she would be locked in a car as the man she was falling for walked into a firefight. The 1,000 different ways this night could end in ruin. "What if Calabrizzi refuses to stand down?" Emily whispered. "Then we will force his hand." "And if you can't?" Adrian's features hardened into a mask of resolve. Then he will not leave that warehouse alive. The raw finality of his words should have filled her with terror, a stark reminder this man was capable of a brutality she could barely comprehend. Instead, a deep and profound weariness washed through Emily. "Have you ever killed someone?" she asked, her voice low. Adrian's gaze locked with hers for a long, weighted silence. "Yes." "How many? Does the number change anything?" "It might." He leaned back, his expression shifting to something intensely clinical. "I have ended 4 lives. 3 were men actively trying to kill me or someone under my protection. The 4th was a man who hurt a child in my care and thought his wealth made him untouchable." His tone was utterly detached. "There is no satisfaction in it, no honor, but I carry no guilt for it. Their decisions brought them to that point, and I made the decision to stop them. That is the reality I occupy. And tomorrow, should Calibrizzi force the confrontation, I will do what is necessary to defend my own, to defend you. Afterward, I will continue on, just as I always have." Emily absorbed his statement, struggling to merge the man who had kissed her only 6 hours prior with this individual calmly discussing the act of killing. They should have been 2 separate people, yet they were one. Adrian was a paradox made flesh, a guardian and a hunter, a teacher and a killer. The one person who saw her completely, and the man who could extinguish a life without a second thought. And she was becoming lost to every facet of him. "I don't know how to be a person who accepts this," Emily admitted. "You don't have to accept it. You only have to decide if you can live with me knowing it." Adrian rose, rounded the desk, and knelt in front of her, his eyes holding hers. "I told you this world shatters people, Emily. That was not hyperbole. If you choose to stay, if you choose this, you choose all of it. The violence, the danger, the shadows that will follow you. I can't promise you it will get easier. I can only promise you the truth about what it costs." "And what does it cost you?" The question seemed to strike him, a visible blow. His jaw clenched before he spoke, his voice dropping. "Every version of myself I could have been on a different road, every person I might have loved in another life." His gaze found hers once more. "I stopped mourning him a long time ago. What you see now is all that's left. This is the only me there is." Emily reached for his hand, weaving her fingers through his. "Then teach me," she breathed, "how to be the woman who can stand in your world without losing the one inside of me." He replied, "I don't know if such a thing is possible." She answered instantly, "We'll never know unless we try." Adrian leaned in to kiss her, but this one was different, softer, as if he were memorizing the feel of her lips. He pulled back, resting his forehead on hers. "Try to get some sleep," he whispered. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Her own question lingered in the space between them. "Will you stay with me?" She felt him tense, a visceral instinct to raise the walls she had just torn down. But then some internal levee broke. With a quiet exhale, his fingers tightened around hers. "Yes," he murmured, the word barely audible. "I'll stay." And so they lay in the guest room, clothed and still, atop the bed covers, his arm a solid weight as she rested her head on his chest. It was the most normal thing they had ever done, and for that reason, the most deeply intimate. The facades were gone, leaving only 2 people caught in a disastrous moment, trying to steal a little peace before the battle. Emily must have slept, because she woke to the gray light of dawn and the cold, vacant space in the bed beside her. Adrian was gone. A note sat at the bedside table, written in the same sharp hand from his study. 7 p.m. Be on time. She held the slip of paper for a heavy moment before she forced herself to move. The hours that followed crawled by with an excruciating slowness. Emily tried to eat but could only stomach a dry piece of toast. She scrolled through her phone for a distraction, but her mind was a maelstrom of fear. By evening, her anxiety had become a fine, persistent tremor in her hands. At 6:30, Marco pulled up in an unmarked SUV. He said nothing as he drove them in silence through the city, heading east, where the streets she knew bled into unfamiliar industrial decay. As they reached the warehouse district, the dying sun bled across the horizon in brutal strokes of orange and crimson. The target structure loomed ahead, an exact copy of the recon photos, a cavernous industrial block surrounded by empty lots and steel fencing. No lights burned inside, but Emily saw the hulking silhouettes of vehicles parked near a loading bay. Calabrizzi's crew was in position. Marco maneuvered the SUV into the shadows behind some derelict containers. A little over 200 yards out, the spot gave them a perfect line of sight to the entrance while keeping them swallowed by the gloom. 2 other sedans were already in place, Adrian's people waiting for the signal. "Where is he?" Emily's voice was a wire pulled taut. "South entrance with Sophia and 3 more. Once the merchandise is in, they'll lock down every exit." Marco handed her a compact radio and an earpiece. "You listen to everything, but you don't transmit unless a life is on the line, and you remember the deal. You do not leave this vehicle no matter what happens." With shaking fingers, Emily secured the device. Her universe shrank to a crackling feed of clipped, tactical voices. Adrian's quiet commands, confirmations of positions, and the subtle sounds of a unit preparing for war. Then his voice broke through the static, impossibly close. "Report." One after another, his team members checked in. Emily counted 8 separate voices, excluding Marco. A unit of 9 against what they estimated to be Calabrizzi's 10 or 12, not including anyone else inside. The math was stark. They were willingly walking into a fight where they were outnumbered. At that moment, headlight beams cut through the twilight as a large truck approached. It backed up to the loading dock with a practiced, unnerving precision. 6 men filed out of the warehouse to begin unloading the cargo. "We have eyes on the target," a voice said over the radio. "Calabrizzi is visible on the east side, +3. A frantic beat started in Emily's ribs. This wasn't a plan on paper anymore. This was real. Through it all, Adrian's voice on comms was a monument of absolute calm and total command. "Hold on my mark. Nobody moves until I say so." The unloading continued without incident. Calabrizzi watched from the side, entirely relaxed as though it were any other night. There was no sign of suspicion, no indication of the trap about to spring. And then, in a single heartbeat, the scene fractured. One of Calabrizzi's men looked down at his phone. His face turned to a mask of horror, and he started yelling. Calabrizzi's head snapped around, his gaze boring into the darkness. He knew they were compromised. "Pull back!" Adriana's voice was no longer calm, it was splintered glass. "Everyone, get out now!" A gunshot ripped the night air. Emily never saw who fired the first shot. She only saw the darkness explode into a constellation of muzzle flashes as the entire world dissolved into pure chaos. Through the glass, Adrian's team erupted from their positions. their gunfire a desperate attempt to contain the chaos. Near the south entrance, Adrien was a phantom, his movements a terrifying ballet as he eliminated unseen threats. Sophia shadowed him, guarding his flank. Suddenly, a wave of Calabrizzi's men surged from the warehouse, a planned ambush. Marco slammed the SUV into gear. "We're leaving now!" "But Adrien, he can handle himself. Our objective is your safety." "No!" Her hand found the door. "I'm not abandoning him. Miss Carter, you promised. And I know what matters more." Emily shoved the door open, exiting the SUV before Marco could react. She heard his furious shouts behind her, but she was already running into the firefight, into the heart of the battle, toward Adrien. It was sheer madness, a suicidal impulse. She was breaking every protocol he'd ever given her. But to drive away felt like a betrayal. She couldn't watch him die from the shelter of a vehicle, saving herself by sacrificing the one person who meant everything to her was not a choice. She ran a mere 30 yards before an arm snaked around her. Her training took over before her brain registered the assault. As Sophia had taught her, she dropped low, twisting violently and slamming an elbow backward. She felt the crack of impact, heard a winded grunt, and was released. She spun, ready for a follow-up, but froze. A young enforcer for Calabrizzi, barely in his 20s, had a pistol trained on her chest. "Stay still," he choked out, staggering from the blow. In that instant, all of Sophia's training dissolved. There was only the gun. Her hands lifted in surrender as a single thought echoed in her head. This is it. It ends here, 30 seconds after the stupidest choice I've ever made. Adrienne's voice cut the chaos like a razor. "Release her!" He materialized from the darkness, a blur of lethal speed she recognized from the wedding. His gun was locked on her captor, his body radiating controlled violence. Yet his face was wrong. The detached calm of a killer was gone, replaced by raw, naked fear in his eyes. "Stay back, Moretti," the kid warned, his own voice shaking. "I'll do it, I swear." "No, you won't." Adrienne's tone was impossibly level. "The moment you try, you stop existing, and unlike her, no one will mourn you. You can't know that. I know you. Danny Russo. You joined Calabrizzi 8 months ago. Your mother is in Queens. Your sister just started at NYU. Adrienne advanced a single, measured step. "If you fire, their lives are over. Do you comprehend what I'm saying?" Danny's weapon dipped. Emily watched terror bloom on his face as the realization hit. He hadn't grabbed a bystander. He held Adrienne Moretti's reason for living. "Let her come to me," Adrienne ordered, his voice a low threat. "Do it, and you walk away from this. Get in your car, go to your mother's, and tell her you're finished. Find a new line of work, one where you don't die on the pavement over one bad choice." "If she walks, Calabrizzi will kill me." "Calabrizzi is about to have bigger problems, but I'll remember this. I'll remember you chose to be smart. That's worth something." The standoff stretched for 10 seconds that felt like an eternity to Emily. The gunfight raged around them, a backdrop to Adriana's finger on the trigger and the frantic pulse in her throat. Then Danny's gun lowered. "Go!" he breathed. She didn't hesitate. She stumbled the few feet between them, and Adrian yanked her behind his body, his pistol tracking Danny until he melted back into the chaos. "What the hell were you thinking?" Adrian's voice was sharp in the lull. "I couldn't leave you." "Your orders were to stay put." "I know." "They could have killed you." "I get that." His grip on her arm was like iron as he hauled her toward the approaching SUV. "We're done here. Now." "What about Calabrese?" "Marco's problem. You made your call, Emily. This is the consequence." They were almost to the car when Sophia's voice crackled over the comms. "Adrian, problem. Calabrese's making a run for the north exit. If he gets to his vehicle, I'm moving in." Adrian cut her short. "Stand down." "Boss, if he gets away—" "I said let him go." Adrian shoved Emily toward Marco and the SUV. "Get her clear." "Take her to the penthouse. She doesn't leave until I get there." "What about you?" Emily asked. "I'm finishing this." "Adrian, no!" He was already turning, striding back into the inferno she had fanned into a blaze. She started after him, but Marco's arm blocked her. "No," he said, his voice absolute. "You've caused enough damage for one night." His words struck her like a fist. She let Marco lead her to the SUV, her eyes locked on the battle, swallowing Adrian, feeling something inside her crack. The drive was a silent ordeal, broken only by the detached voices over the radio feed. Emily listened to Adrian direct his team. Cool confirmations of targets neutralized, positions secured, and withdrawal routes. Then Sophia's last report: Calabrese was in his car and gone. The mission was a failure, and it was her fault. The fighting was over by the time they reached Adrian's building. The radio was dead. Marco pulled into the underground garage and cut the engine, but for a long moment they just sat. "Is he okay?" Emily's voice was barely audible. "He's alive. He always is." Marco's tone was flat, empty. "But you need to understand, Miss Carter. What you did wasn't just reckless. You made Adrian choose between the mission and you. You put him in an impossible position. It's not fair to him or to the men who depend on his leadership." "I know that." "Do you? Because it looks like you think this is some movie, that the consequences aren't real." Marco faced her, his eyes hard. "Danny Russo could have killed you. Adrian would have killed him. Then Danny's mother and sister would be dead too. All because some paralegal needed to make a statement." Tears burned her eyes. "I didn't want—" "What you want doesn't matter, only what happens. If you're gonna be in this life, you have to learn that your choices have ripples you can't even imagine. They affect people you'll never meet, and sometimes they destroy them." For a moment, a crack appeared in Marco's armor. "Adrian cares about you more than he should. But that doesn't give you the right to jeopardize everything because you're too stubborn to listen." He got out of the SUV, leaving her in the quiet. Emily sat, his words echoing in the silence, before finally forcing herself to follow him to the elevator. Without Adrian, the penthouse was a vast, cold mausoleum. In her room, she stripped and stood under searing hot water, letting it burn until her skin was red. But the heat couldn't wash away the image of Danny's gun, the sheer panic on Adrian's face, or the catastrophic choice she'd forced on him. She was sitting on her bed, wrapped in a towel, when she heard the front door click open. Emily pulled on jeans and a t-shirt and went to the living room. Adrian was there, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the last few hours. His shirt was ripped, and a smear of someone else's blood stained his sleeve. A faint tremor shook his hand as he poured a drink. "Are you hurt?" she asked from the doorway. "No, it's not my blood." He downed the whiskey in one go and poured another. His team was clear. 3 were wounded, but they would heal. Calabrese was gone, but his operation was in ashes, crippled. It was a win that bought them maybe 6 months of quiet. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Are you?" Adrian turned, his gaze glittering with something dangerous. Sorry you disobeyed an order, or sorry for what happened because of it. Both. I don't know. She stepped further into the room, the space between them feeling like a canyon. I am sorry for making it harder, for making you choose. I am sorry I ignored you, but I would do it again. It was not a guess. A lie rested on Emily's tongue, a hollow vow of caution she could never honor. But Adrian's gaze demanded the truth, so she would give it. Probably, she admitted. If I thought you were in actual danger, and I could make a difference, yes, I'd do it again. A harsh, empty laugh escaped him. You don't understand making a difference, Emily. You have 6 hours of training and a martyr complex. That isn't a strategy for a gunfight. It's a way to get yourself killed, leaving me to clean up the mess. I don't need your protection. Yes, you do. That's the entire foundation of our arrangement. It's why you are here. They came for me, and you were caught in the fallout. The only way you survive is to stay close. He slammed the glass on the table, and it shattered. But I can't keep you alive if you defy my orders. I can't shield you if you insist on running into the fire just to prove you're tough. I'm not trying to prove anything. Then what was tonight? Because it looked like an audition for my world, a test to see if you could take the heat, to prove you are not the meek little thing Nathaniel Ashford threw away. Adrian closed the space between them, his gaze pinning her. But you have nothing to prove to me, Emily. I already see you. I have since you walked into the Crimson Lounge with that defiant ring and asked for help I should have refused. You are brave and stubborn, and so desperate to matter that you will walk into harm's way just to feel it, and that terrifies me more than anything Calabrese could ever dream up. Tears finally cut tracks down Emily's cheeks. I don't know how to be anyone else. I'm not asking for someone else. I'm asking you to trust that your life is enough to earn your place here. You already have one. You have since you sat in my office and admitted you knew how it felt to be erased. Then why does it feel like I always have to prove it? Because Nathaniel taught you to believe you were inadequate. That being quiet meant being invisible. Now you're overcorrecting into a dangerous extreme to be the opposite. Adrian was so close, she could feel the heat from his body. You don't have to be reckless to be remarkable, Emily. You just have to be yourself. And what if I'm not good enough for this world? Then we will figure that out together. He pulled her into an embrace, holding her so tightly she felt the steady beat of his heart. But you are not allowed to destroy yourself chasing some romantic idea of this life. You do not get to throw yourself into danger because you think it's what I want. What I need is you, breathing. Everything else is noise. Emily buried her face against his chest as the tears came freely, for the fear, for the night's disastrous potential, for knowing that loving Adrian was a constant war between herself and who his world needed her to be. I hate that I made everything worse, she choked out. You did, but you also broke free when Danny grabbed you. That elbow would have impressed Sophia. She felt his lips in her hair. And you believed I would get you out. That means something too. Even though I shouldn't have been there. They stood in that embrace for a long time, an isolated island in the middle of Adrian's perfect living room. He finally pulled back just enough to catch her eye. These are the new rules of engagement, he said. You can live in this world. You can stand with me when trouble comes. But you have to trust my order to stand down. You must understand that me protecting you is not the same as me thinking you're weak. Can you do that? Emily considered it. weighing what it would cost to be in Adrian's life without losing herself, to find a balance between her strength and his reality. "I can try," she said finally. "That is all I ask." Adrian's kiss was unhurried and deep, as though he were committing her to memory. He rested his forehead against hers in their quiet way. "What's the next move?" Emily asked, with Calabrese. "Now he knows I'm ready for open war, that I will take his organization apart until he either folds or runs. He will reach out in a few days to negotiate." Adrian's tone was completely practical. "He'll want assurances I'll stay away. I'll want assurances that you are untouchable. We will strike a deal, and some version of normal will return from before he crossed a line that can never be crossed." And that was the rhythm of their world. This was how they operated. You used violence until one side broke, or both sides saw that victory would be too costly. A truce would hold until the next man's ambition shattered the peace. Emily thought about this life, a constant cycle of bloodshed and tense deals, all based on a temporary calm she knew was a ticking bomb. It should have made her want to flee. Instead, she just felt bone-tired. "I don't know if I'm built for this," she confessed. "I understand, and if you decide to leave, I won't stop you. I'll make sure you're safe. I'll let Calabrese know you are no longer in play. I can give you back your old life, no strings attached." Adrian's voice was surprisingly gentle. "But my honest hope is that you'll stay." "Why?" "Because you're a reminder of a life that's more than just surviving. You see what's underneath all the violence. In only 2 weeks, you've become essential to my world." He pulled back to look her straight in the eye. "I love you, Emily, and the timing is a mess. But you asked for the truth, and this is the truest thing I know." Emily's breath hitched. Some part of her knew, but hearing him say it changed the world around them. "I love you too," she answered, "which is the entire problem. Loving you means accepting all of this. The danger, the blurred lines, the fact that men like Danny Russo are a product of your choices. I don't know if I can live with that weight." "You wouldn't be carrying it alone." "But I'd still have to carry it. It's the price of admission to your life. I have to share the burden of what you do, even the parts I hate." Adrian was silent for a long moment, then he offered a new path. "What if we change the terms?" "What are you proposing?" "What if I step back from the front line? Let my lieutenants handle the daily wars and take myself out of the direct fire. A complete exit isn't an option. I have too many duties, too many people relying on me, but I could build a buffer to shield you from the worst of it." Emily could only stare at him. "You would try that?" "I would. For you, I'm willing to try." He cupped her face in his hands. "I can't promise a complete change. I can't promise we won't have nights like this again. But I can promise to build a life where they're the exception, not the rule. Where you don't have to choose between your love for me and who you are. And if it fails, if you can't step away, then we face that together, like we've faced everything else." Adrian's smile was fractured, holding an uncertainty she had never seen. "I have no map for this, Emily. I'm making it up as I go, just like you. But I know I want to try if you'll meet me in the middle." Emily's mind flew back to the woman she was 3 weeks ago. Invisible. A ghost who thought that was her destiny. She thought of the woman she was now. Stronger, braver, still finding her edges, but not afraid to push. And she saw the woman she could be if she stayed. forging a future with the man who saw her when she felt unseen. This path would be difficult, possibly the hardest thing in her life. But held in Adrian's arms, his gaze her anchor, Emily knew her decision was already made. She made her choice the second she ran toward that warehouse. "All right," she whispered. "Let's try." The wave of pure relief on Adrian's face nearly buckled her knees. He kissed her again, a slow, deliberate promise, and Emily let herself sink into it, imagining a future they would have to build from the ashes. It was nothing like the fairy tale she'd dreamed of with Nathaniel, with no safety and no guarantees, but it would be theirs, and it would be real. Maybe that was all that mattered. The next 3 months were a hard lesson that everything of value comes with a price. As Adrian said, Calabrese contacted him 4 days after their fight. A fragile truce was brokered after a fortnight of tense talks, a legal battle more complex than any corporate takedown. Calabrese kept his kingdom, Adrian held his, and Emily was taken off the board like a captured piece. The pact was sealed under the cold shadow of mutually assured destruction, a threat both sides still believed. Adrian kept his word, pulling back his forces. He gave Marco the daily grind, saving his elite for critical missions, and shifted his focus to clean ventures that needed no armed guards. This was no clean slate. Some evenings he would walk through the door, a storm of quiet rage coiled in his shoulders. Muted calls in Italian still echoed from his study. Conversations she knew were forbidden territory. Yet it was progress. Emily kept her promise too. She took a role at a non-profit for abuse survivors, using her legal skills to champion the forgotten. The work was punishing and the pay was meager, yet it was more real than any brief she had ever filed. She now spoke for the silenced. She knew their pain in a way she never could have before him. After 6 weeks, she moved into the penthouse for good. Claudia met the news with her usual rigid composure, but Emily once saw a ghost of a smile when she survived a dinner with his lieutenants without incident. Maya stayed watchful but unshakably loyal, a trait Emily valued deeply. She fed her best friend a carefully edited story. A new man, a fast-moving romance, a complicated job, but it was working. Maya had only to see the look on Emily's face when she said Adrian's name to drop the questions. Certain grounds are not meant to be trod. On her dresser, the grandmother's ring lay waiting in its velvet box. She tried to give the ring back multiple times, but he always waved it away. "It was never about the ring," he said the last time she offered. "It's yours. Maybe one day you'll give it to our daughter." That casual mention of a child, of a future, landed with a physical blow. They hadn't spoken of forever, of a wedding, of a family, of anything past the next crisis. Yet the idea now hung between them, a silent, weighted thing. 3 months after the warehouse, she studied herself at the mirror of her new room. Their room, even if he kept a separate one for nights when sleep wouldn't come. She stood encased in another gown he had chosen, this one the color of a deep emerald forest, readying herself for yet another society affair she dreaded. This time, though, she wasn't performing to prove her value. It was simply a part of life she had accepted. Adrienne filled the doorway, already in a tuxedo, looking impossibly sharp. "Ready?" he asked. Emily faced him, turning from her reflection. It was the mayor's fundraising gala. Their non-appearance would breed gossip, and they now had a public image to protect, as his legitimate businesses relied on the city's power brokers. Adrienne closed the distance between them, pulling her into an embrace. But if you truly can't stand it, we send our regrets and stay home. Emily considered the offer. She could call Maya, order in, and watch some forgettable show with a man who built his world on terror but treated her like she was sacred. The second option was infinitely better than feigning interest in politicians. But she had come to understand a hard truth these past few months. The right path is often the hardest one. Sometimes you just have to show up. "No, we have to go," she sighed. "But you're buying me ridiculously expensive wine for my trouble." "Done." They were almost out the door when Emily stopped. "Adrian." "Yes. Thank you for seeing me when I felt like a ghost, for showing me the strength I had, for loving me even when my own terrible decisions nearly destroyed us both." Adrian held her again, his arms a fortress around her. "And thank you for having the nerve to walk into my office holding that ring, for being stubborn enough to stay when I tried to push you out, for loving me, knowing everything that I am." Emily went on her toes, shifting in his arms to kiss him. As they separated, she whispered, "We're a magnificent mess, aren't we?" "Completely," he agreed. "But we're our mess. I can live with that." "Good, because I'm not going anywhere." They left the penthouse a united front, Adrian's hand a steadying weight on the small of her back as they headed to another performance. This time, however, Emily was not wearing a mask. She was exactly who she was supposed to be, unbreakable, defiant, and still learning to live in a world that had almost crushed her. She had survived Nathaniel's betrayal. She had survived her own rock bottom. She had survived Adrian Moretti's orbit and learned that love could cost you everything: peace, safety, and a good night's sleep. But she also found out she was stronger than she ever imagined. Here, our subject, Emily, is faced with the core tenet of her new life, that to love someone is to accept every broken piece of them. But first she must survive the hollow ritual of a charity event. Here, politicians make promises they won't keep. The rich write checks for tax breaks, and every person wears a mask of goodwill. Emily lasts 2 hours before she needs an escape. After peeling herself away from an overly familiar city councilman, she finds a moment of peace on a terrace. She is not, however, by herself. Emily Carter. She turns to see Nathaniel, her ex-fiancé, looking refined, handsome, and soulless. "Nathaniel," she answers, her tone flat and cold. "How's married life?" He gives a dismissive shrug. "It's good. Fine." He then steps into her space, his concern so obviously fake it's insulting. "I heard you were with Adrian Moretti. Is that a serious thing?" "It is," Emily states. He tries to sound protective, saying, "You know the man's reputation." And just like that, Emily shatters his entire posture. "I know his reputation. I know exactly who and what he is, and he's my choice. The same way your wife chose you. I guess we all just picked the demons we're willing to live with. The blow lands perfectly." "Your concern is noted," she says, turning to leave, before spinning back to face him. "No, correction, it's not appreciated. You don't get to pretend you care, now that my life is better. Your opinion on my partner doesn't give you a vote in my decisions. I've found happiness, Nathaniel, real happiness. If you can't be happy for me, then at least have the decency to leave me alone." She doesn't wait for him to speak. She walks back inside, finds Adrian, and links her fingers with his. He gives her a questioning look. "Time to go," he murmurs. "Way past time." They make their excuses and are gone within 10 minutes. The ride back to the penthouse is a shared, quiet moment, Emily's hand resting on Adrian's thigh as he drives through the city. This is her world now, her life. Nathaniel was there, she says, as they pull into the garage. I know, I saw him watching you. Does it bother you that he was my fiancé? Adrian cuts the engine and looks at her. Should it? I don't know. It would bother some men. I'm not some men, and he's your past. You're with me. It's a non-issue. He then leans over the console and gives her a soft kiss. Besides, he adds, I think we can agree you've made a significant upgrade. A real full laugh bursts out of Emily. Yes, I think that's safe to say. Upstairs, the formal wear comes off, replaced by comfortable clothes as they unwind on the couch with wine and Thai takeout. Adrian swears this place has the best pad see you do in the city. The scene is one of stunning normalcy, a stark contrast to the violence that brought them together. But this is what building a life is. It's not a series of grand, dramatic moments. It is mostly this: quiet nights, good food, and the easy silence between two people who chose one another against all logic. I've been thinking, Adrian says between bites of noodles, about where we are headed, long term. He puts his container down, giving her his complete attention. I am going to make you my wife. The world seems to stop for a second in Emily's mind. What? Not tomorrow, not next month, or even next year, but when we're ready. I want to marry you. I want to build a life that is only ours. Have children if you want them. To make something that isn't built on fear or violence or the darkness that was my life before you. I know this is a lot, Emily. But you need to know that when I look at my future, you are the only thing I see. If this frightens you, tell me and I will withdraw. But if a piece of you wants this, I need to know. Emily sets her bowl down, her hands revealing a faint tremor. She weighs the life she'd planned with Nathaniel. Safe, orderly, and a slow spiritual death. Then she pictures a future with Adrian. Treacherous, volatile, and profoundly true. In that moment, she knew who she was. I want it too, she whispered. I want to be your wife, to create that life. I want all of it, most of all the difficult parts. A smile broke across Adrian's face, radiant as the sunrise. He pulled her onto his lap, their dinner forgotten, lost to a long embrace as the food went cold. We are going to make 1,000 mistakes, he breathed against her skin. Undoubtedly. We will fight and drive each other to madness. I expect nothing less. But we will face it all side by side. Yes, Emily vowed, her fingers tangling in his hair. Together. They spoke of no dates or details that night. No grand plans were laid, no arrangements made. They just dwelled in the promise of a life they would shape. 6 months on, Adrian made a formal proposal, not with a family heirloom, but with something entirely new. It was a symbol of the future they were building, not the past they had survived. Emily agreed. A year passed before they wed, in a private affair for their chosen few. No dignitaries, no socialites, no audience for whom to perform. Just Marco and Sophia, Claudia and Maya, and the handful of souls who were their real family. It was not by any means perfect. The warehouse still haunted Emily's dreams. Adrian still harbored a capacity for darkness. He made choices she had to learn to live with. But between them, there were never any lies. They argued when they had to, admitted their faults, and always chose one another, especially when it was a harder choice. 2 years after their vows, Emily holds their daughter, Isabella, in the quiet of the nursery. She felt overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the change in her life. Adrian stood in the doorway, weariness etched on his face, yet his eyes held a deep peace. "Is she asleep?" he murmured. "Finally. She has your rebellious heart, I think. We're doomed." He moved to her, wrapping his arms around them both. "How are you?" "Exhausted, aching, and completely enthralled by this tiny dictator who has stolen my sleep." Emily glanced up at him. "And you?" "Terrified I will ruin this, and so grateful you are here to stop me." Adrian pressed a kiss to Isabella's forehead, then to Emily's. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing some small part of me worth saving. For being brave enough to stay when all I did was push. For creating this life alongside me." His voice cracked. "For making me think I could be more than my past." Gently, with a sleeping child between them, Emily kissed him. "We rescued each other, Adrian. That's what we do." They stayed there, bathed in the glow of a single soft light. Emily's thoughts drifted back to the ring she almost sold for survival, to the man who saw past her fear and found her strength, to the cascade of impossible decisions that led to this quiet room, to a life she never could have imagined. This was no fairy tale she had once dreamed of. It was better, it was real. And 3 weeks later, Emily found that velvet box on Isabella's dresser with a note from Adrian. "For when she is old enough to understand what it means to choose your own fate." And she wept, knowing every hardship was validated, because they had built a thing that could never be shattered. They had forged a legacy for themselves, for their daughter, and for the life they were shaping together. They had built a sanctuary. And Emily Carter, who had once felt invisible, who thought her life would be a footnote, stood in that home beside her chosen family and knew at last, in her very soul, that she was 100%, completely and profoundly seen.
From a behavioral standpoint, Emily's early condition reflects classic self-minimization after relational invalidation. Nathaniel's rejection did not simply break her heart, it destabilized her sense of self. When a partner repeatedly frames a person as not enough, the victim often internalizes deficiency as identity. Emily's quietness, once a personality trait, becomes evidence against herself. Adrian, meanwhile, presents a different psychological architecture. He demonstrates high control, emotional compartmentalization, hypervigilance, and a pronounced protector complex. Such men are often misread as merely dominant. In reality, many are deeply organized around threat. They do not trust softness because softness once cost them too much. His instinct to train, command, and later distance himself from Emily reflects not lack of feeling, but fear of attachment translated into control. Their bond becomes compelling because each carries a wound the other can read. Emily is drawn to certainty because uncertainty humiliated her. Adrian is drawn to her vulnerability because it awakens dormant tenderness, but that tenderness immediately terrifies him, hence the push-pull dynamic. Closeness, then retreat, protection, then cruelty, confession, then emotional lockdown. The life lesson here is clinically important. Not every intense connection is healing simply because it feels transformative. Pain can mistake recognition for safety. Emily initially experiences Adrian as both rescuer and revelation, but true growth begins only when she gains agency within the relationship rather than dissolving into it. Another significant lesson is that self-respect and recklessness are not the same phenomenon. After years of invisibility, many people overcorrect. They assume bravery means charging into danger, speaking the loudest, proving they are no longer weak. Emily's run toward the warehouse is psychologically consistent with that overcorrection. She is not merely impulsive. She is trying to prove to herself that she belongs in the new identity she has built. Adrian's correction is the healthiest truth in the narrative. A person does not need to bleed to be real. Worth is not established through self-sacrifice. It is established through boundaries, discernment, and the refusal to confuse chaos with meaning. Thus, the final lesson is precise. Healing is not becoming fearless. Healing is learning which fear deserves obedience and which fear deserves defiance.